most.
And there tends to be a bit of a stigma about that, at least in Canadian politics, talking about minority governments, that they're unstable, that they tend to fall apart, that they don't get things done.
I would just argue that that person has not looked very hard at our history. We got public health care, or universal health care, under a minority government, one of the hallmark Canadian trademarks. And
I'm not here to argue against you, but there does seem to be a sentiment floating around, especially when we talk to people just on the street. People, they tend to feel fearful that would lead to destabilization. But according to you, and I think from what we can see, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, we're a solid year into, it's not a coalition government per se, but certainly a minority-supported government, and I don't see anything happening to them anytime soon.
Right, now the ground is still here beneath our feet. We're still standing and breathing.
Absolute worst case, we have to go have another election, which, I mean, we certainly don't want to cause voter fatigue, but we only vote 3 times every 4 years. It's not that big of a deal. It's not like down in America where you have the primaries,
your by-elections, the whole shebang. No, it's different.
And the thing is that where you go to the CBC and you get the promise tracker with all the promises that were kept and not. The latest, last week it showed, you know, the Liberals and a majority government keeping 16% of the promises. And now if you go into the NDP, a minority government provincially, it showed them keeping 3/4 of the promises. And that is with a government that needs to seek approval for almost everything they do from the Greens. And on the other hand, they can do whatever they want, but they just chose that. And it shows you, you know, that having a party in the middle to hold people accountable is key to them staying on track.
Yeah, I think there is indeed a lot of fear about minority governments. I don't think it's based on a whole lot of really solid evidence. I mean, maybe in theory, the idea that you could be having an election every year or something, yeah, that sounds awful. But
it sounds awful. But is that the case?
I haven't seen that happening anywhere.
No.
Maybe not.
Fingers crossed. But we seem. I mean, certainly my experience within the BC Greens, we're far more dedicated to keeping government steady for the next 4 years, just to prove that this thing can work. I mean, at the end of the day, especially with things like Site C or Kinder Morgan, I mean, if it doesn't work out with the NDP, it's not like it was going to work out any better with the BC Liberals. Yes. So I think it makes far more sense to hold on to that before just tossing up our hands and saying, let's have another election.
It keeps parties pragmatic. It keeps parties, you know, like realistic on what they can achieve in the long term. And you get leaders that are stable and that are effective, like in Europe, you know. It's less debt because they know they're pragmatic in what they can achieve. And it's not, you know, keeping saying we're going to cut all the taxes, but we're not going to cut the services, and then you go into debt. Or we're going to increase all the services, but we're not going to increase our revenue, and then you go into debt. And that is what happens in Canada, and the United States, and the United Kingdom, where you have some of the highest levels of debt per capita, whereas you go to Nordic countries or Germany or New Zealand, and you see that they need to show some kind of financial proof for the parties in the middle to form coalitions with them. It really makes you be smarter politics.
Right. It's a coming together over base economic issues and having an understanding that regardless of which way you sway in the next election, you need to be set up. Yeah. And that, in the end, serves the people best.
Yes. I mean, preaching to the choir, but yes.
I know, I'm talking to you.
Yeah. Well, so thank you very much for coming. We had a great time with you, and hopefully we can continue being involved in the upcoming referendum.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really stoked to see 2 fellow young people engaged in politics, helping to get other people engaged more in politics, and it's a very exciting time for our province. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show, Ian. All right, that's it for us on this segment of Voting for Change. We'll see you next time.